Jim, I was thinking today about my passion for flexibility,
Oh, yeah.
mobility, flippability. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm a gymnast. Actually, I think the proper pronunciation is gymnast. I'm a gymnast.
Yeah. You might be the tallest gymnast on the eastern seaboard there, huh?
Needless to say, I have the body for it. I have the
Mm.
body of a gymnast.
I've always been fascinated by gymnastics, partly because I so don't, like to just reveal your joke entirely. I think we're two peas in a pod as far as our lack of gymnastics abilities go.
Yeah, it's not good.
When I was in junior high school, we did a community theater production of The Wizard of Oz. And of course, I'd always wanted to play the Scarecrow because he's so funny. But people directing were like, no, you're more Tin Man material. And it was because of my flexibility and movement or lack thereof.
Yeah, you could play C3PO,
Right, totally.
Star
Yep,
Wars.
that's my role right
I think if you're C3PO, I must be like R2D2 in terms of basic
there.
flexibility. I'm just like a Coca-Cola can with two little wheels.
Did you have to sit on the floor when you were really young at school?
Yeah.
I got in trouble. My teacher got frustrated with me because I couldn't sit cross-legged. I couldn't do it. I'd have to sit with my legs out and even then with my back leaned back a bit with my hands behind me just because I couldn't bend that far.
Wow, that's horrible.
Yeah, pretty bad.
It's no wonder your strict press, puts you in such a cave of pain.
Yeah, yeah, man. I really should work on I really should work on my flexibility and range of motion. I really should.
I actually do have very good range of motion, like in the old CrossFit workout. So you need to exercise a large range, and then actually I'm pretty good. My ankles are good. You know what I mean? My hips are good, and then my shoulders are pretty good. I think really what holds me back is just general fatness. From from my dream of doing the, what do they call it? The sawhorse, the seahorse.
Yeah,
That's all. I
the
just want to swing my
pommel
body. I
horse,
just
some kind of horse.
something like that. I just want to swing my body around that bizarrely shaped thing with the handles.
Yeah, well, that's part of my fascination with gymnastics is like when you can't do a thing, when you see other people who can do it really well, that is really
Yeah.
impressive. Part of
Yeah.
it too,
Hats off to them.
there's also the variety of things. Like you say, there's the horsey thing, there's the floor routine. I think there's more than one floor routine. There's the bars, uneven bars, the the rings too. You see that? Is it called the Iron Cross when people will lower themselves on the rings with their arms straight out? Holy moly. Whew. Fascinating stuff. But it's such a variety of stuff. Like, I am bewildered. I love watching it when the Olympics come around, but I don't know what's going on. I'm enjoying it, but I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. Well, so Jim, to segue away from the bit here, I think that gymnastics is interesting in the sense that, well, certainly some elements of it are sort of like the classic artistic, subjective elements, right? And they've come up with a way of scoring gymnastics stuff that seems to work pretty well. I mean, figure skating, snowboarding, ski tricks and stuff, they all seem to be in that category where you're trying to make objective these performances so that they can be scored and judged. But it's kind of complicated. And then, Jim, if I'm understanding you correctly, you've had a look into gymnastics scoring.
Took a little peek. That's right. Yep. I thought to myself, like, it's time to see, like, what is going on. It's like, aside from not really understanding what the art form or the sport is, like, what is it that they're really doing? I also really don't understand how a score is determined, especially coming from a position where I'm like, all of this is impressive. If this is out of 10, they all get a 10 out of 10 from me, Like, this is all very
Yeah.
impressive. And it does bring to mind one specific experience I had once when I was not, of course, not judging in a pipe competition. That's not a thing that I do. But I was doing like a commentary thing, right? A little bit of stewarding, but I was also like sitting with a friend and we were making fun jokes and stuff as people would come in and out of the circle, trying to keep the crowd entertained. And some people came up to me and were like, hey, like they'd been sitting there listening to the competition that day for a while. And they came up to me and they're like, hey, what is going on here?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
It
And
happens
I
all the
think,
time.
oh, we're the gymnastics to some other people sometimes. Other people like listening to bagpipes, but maybe don't know what's going on. Like there's a variety of different types of competitions here. How the heck is a score being extracted from this? And I don't know if it's introspectively useful for us to kind of hold up a mirror to our own art sport by looking at another art sport. But let me tell you, here's what I can understand about how gymnastics is scored. And we'll see if it does something for us, huh?
I also don't let me forget to talk through like some of the fatal flaws in the way that we score our competitions as well, because I do have thoughts about that.
Yeah.
But let's hear about gymnastics.
Okay, so this is a very basic overview. I'm not a gymnast, don't know for sure, and there's variation in different types of competitions. That's one thing that I've learned by reading about this a little bit, like how team scores are calculated, for example, versus individual scores. But here's the basics, okay? You got an Olympic gymnastics competition. You're going to have a pool of possible judges, and from that pool, you're going to pull not one, not two, not five, 9 judges. So you get 9
And how do you
judges
pull?
together. That I'm not sure. They bribed you?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. But you get 9 judges, and at the Olympics, it needs to be like internationally balanced and things like that. And they're split onto 3 different panels. Now you might think to yourself, oh, 9, 3 panels, there'll be 3 judges on each panel. That's not the case though. So these 3 panels, we've got the D panel, we've got the E panel, and we've got the R panel. So D panel, that's the difficulty panel, okay? And there are 2 judges on the difficulty panel. E, that's the execution panel. You got 6 judges on the execution, and the rest of the judges are on the reference panel. So wait, 6? I guess that's just 1 judge on the reference panel. So on the D panel, maybe it's obvious, what they're doing is they're calculating the difficulty of what a person did. On the E panel, they're calculating how their execution of the move was. And on the R panel, they're correcting for any problems in the execution score.
So who's correcting for problems on the
That's the reference
score?
That's the reference panel or the reference judge. They're
So what is it?
correcting for
What do they
problems
do?
on the executions. Well, let me take you through that in order. So you got 2 judges on the D panel, on the difficulty panel. So they're going to determine the difficulty of what's going on. So a gymnast's routine has a set difficulty score, and the way that works is it starts at 0, and those 2 judges are watching what they're doing with their routine, and they combine the total difficulty of each element of the routine that the gymnast achieves throughout their routine. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, this might be analogous to like if we were looking at bagpipes and we said, okay, D throws and F doublings are worth this many points or something like that, right? And we said, maybe we even said that like 2/4 marches get you if you're going to try to execute a 2/4 march, you get this many points. But if you're going to try to execute a strathspey, you get this many points. So you look at what the gymnast has put into their routine in terms of which flips and which loop-de-loops, etc. And each of those probably has an approximate score. This is me trying to understand what's going on here, right? And so starting at 0, based on what you're doing, and you have to pull the move off in the routine, I believe, in order to get the numbers. It's like if you try to do it and you don't manage it, then you don't get the numbers for that element of your routine. Starting at 0, you build up your score for difficulty in that way. That's what that panel is doing. The execution panel, though, that has 6 people sitting on it, they determine the execution score. This is determined by the execution of artistry in the gymnast's routine. So I think from what I'm reading, this has to do with how well the gymnast does each of the moves that the difficulty panel is looking at, but it also has to do with like their transition between different elements. So like it's like your flair. You got a little flair when you do that flip. That's a little better execution, and you got
and most of the judges are allocated to the execution.
That's right. This is where the majority of the judges are. Yeah. This one in difference though, the execution score starts at 10. And you get points removed for like poor execution.
Makes sense.
Then at the end, they're going to take the 2 and put them together. And then the reference judge or reference panel is just there to correct for any like anomalies amongst the execution judges. So I would imagine that this would be something like one execution judge is like, that was excellent, no points removed. And another judge is like looking at the same element in the same routine and says, that was poorly executed. I'm taking 5 points off for that. that's a pretty big anomaly. And so you have a reference judge who goes, okay, well, how did that happen? Oh, were you sitting on one side of the floor routine and you were sitting on the other side? Or, did I notice that you sneezed right when the person landed that? So you actually don't know how it went, that kind of thing, I would assume.
Interesting. Maybe they're also looking at going out of bounds, time violations, and so on. A reference judge,
Oh, good
like
point.
technicalities.
Yeah, good point. I bet somebody's got to be doing that. Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, you have several judges, and then you have a couple judges like dealing with the difficulty question, and then that sets your upper limit, right? So you have your difficulty. So the more difficulty that you go with, plus your potential score of 10, like a perfect technique score, right? That sets the upper limit as to what points you could potentially achieve.
Yeah, because then at the
Maybe.
end you take your difficulty score plus your execution score. So you can imagine if your execution was poor, then that just gets smaller and smaller. And then you also remove there are neutral deductions, which I think is probably technical violations, like your foot went out of the line there, time limit, you went over the time limit, that kind of thing. And then that gives you your final score. Yeah. As I've been reading about this, and also I invite all of the gymnast, piper, drummers in the audience to hop in the comments section and correct what I've got wrong, because I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff here. But what I'm having fun imagining is like, well, what if this was our system for pipe and drum competitions,
Well, I think that why do they, I'm actually kind of curious. Why don't they just rank? I'm talking to ChatGPT while you're talking. Why don't they just rank the gymnasts from first to last and add up their placings like we do in pipe bands?
I appreciate
ask
that you've got your chatbot trained enough on like piping stuff that you can just like directly reference, like we do. Your chatbot will be like, oh yeah, like us in the bagpiping world.
And then this is here it is. So I think it's going to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to piping. So it says, this is a great question. Thanks, ChatGPT. Have you noticed it's like so annoyingly complimentary after every question now? It's so lame.
I was proud of my son, dude. My oldest son has been using chat a little bit to work on some stories he's been writing. He'll ask chat for like ideas. I mean, like, hey, is this a good direction to take my story? How can I make this more concise? Stuff like that. And the other day he said to me, he's like, Dad, I think I'm going to stop using ChatGPT to write my stories. And I was like, oh, why is that? He's like, because it is such a sycophant. I was like, oh, good word, buddy.
Yeah.
But he was like, I'm trying to get good ideas and it keeps telling me I'm the most brilliant thing that's ever existed. And I don't think that's going to help me get good ideas. I was really proud of him. That was a good insight.
It's kind of an annoying trend. I just try to ignore it. It's a good question, especially coming from the pipe band world where ordinal ranking, so that must be what it's called, adding up placings from different judges is the norm, right? So why can't we just do that in gymnastics? And here are the reasons why. Number one, more precise differentiation. And again, remember, everyone keep this in mind. This is just AI. So there's always a good chance these are just bad points. But ChatGPT says a scoring system lets judges quantify exactly how much better or worse a routine is. So I was talking to you earlier about the problems with pipe band scoring. So and I'm not a mathematician, so I could be wrong about this too. But when you have a pipe band competition, right? Let's say you have two drum corps and they're both incredibly amazing drum corps, right? Let's say the drum corps and the remainder of the field are all very weak. Okay. What happens when you give one of the great drum corps first and the other drum corps second? What does that say mathematically?
That one is good and one is bad?
Not just that. But it says that one core is literally 2 times better than the other.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah,
when that's not
because you can't do I'll tell you what, you get 1 and you get 1.8 or something like that.
I know, and it's so frustrating. It can be so frustrating, right? It can be so frustrating, even if you feel like the judge got it right. It can be so frustrating because the difference between first and fourth, if you did it gymnastics style, might be just 99.9. And the difference between first and fourth, maybe fourth place is just 99.6, right?
I see what you mean. Yeah. So you could still have first, second, third, and fourth, but you'd be able to see the scores.
Right. And maybe the rest of the cores in the field are 82.1 or something, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a big difference. And this is why it's so important for us to score this way, right? It's for the precise differentiation of what's going on, right? And then meanwhile, you could be fourth place in a field where you're very, very close to being as good as the winners, But in that case, you're 4 times worse mathematically than the winners in just the way that we rank it. And unfortunately, that's exactly what you see. And so you have these disappointing splits. And what we really need in pipe bands and in solos is, and I don't know, what would you call this? So like another question is, if you call pipe band style ordinal ranking, what do you call the gymnastic style of scoring? Cumulative point-based scoring or open-ended additive scoring system? Okay, whatever. Anyway, so it also handles ties and large fields better. So in gymnastics, dozens of athletes compete, often with very tight margins. Ranking doesn't handle ties or very close routines well. Scoring gives objective spacing between performances. Okay, fine. This encourages difficulty plus execution balance, which is really kind of interesting. Although, how would you calculate the difficulty of a pipe band performance? I'm not sure that's going to work.
It's a good point. The calculation is surely the like skill set, the like how many years have they been doing this? Like what grade are they in? Like that thing is very difficult for grade 3, but that thing is not at all difficult for grade 1. That kind of thing would probably come into effect.
It could be, yeah. Yeah, but then also one person's trash is another man's treasure too. So
true enough.
So like some tunes are hard for me and they're easy for my pal and vice versa, right? Just having to do with your own abilities and so on. Where gymnastics is like, I feel like it's more rigid and objective in that sense, in the calculation of difficulty sense. It's like, well, if you could do 4 flips in the air, that's more difficult than 3 flips or 3.5 flips in the air, right? Like that's easy to figure out.
I don't know for sure, but I would imagine there aren't a lot of people out there who are like, I have a hard time doing 2 flips, but when I get to 5, easy, so.
Right. So let's see. Ranking systems can lead to subjectivity if judges don't align on whether difficulty or cleanliness matters more. And by the way, doesn't that happen all the time? It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Should I reward the guy for trying the hard tune, or should I reward the guy for playing the easy tune really well? What should I do?
Well, yeah.
I feel like we've talked about this in the podcast, haven't we? Number 4. Hold that thought. We have to leave room for the machine to have their say.
Right.
Number 4, it enables international standardization. So gymnastics is governed by an international thingamajig. And then the code of points gives a detailed standardized scoring system for every element and error. By the way, I think that's a good quality of the pipe band ranking system. It is sort of internationally done now, right? Like that is how we score it. By the way, that wasn't always the case. I feel like piping used to get 60% of the weighting back in the day in USPBA. So it's become more internationally standardized, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But why do pipe bands choose ordinals? Because we have much smaller fields, it says. It's judged across different categories, piping, drumming, ensemble, with a focus on relative placing in each, and less need to distinguish up 1 point difference. Disagree with that completely, ChatGPT, you suck. In other words, pipe bands judge relative performance while gymnastics rewards absolute quality and calculated risk. Yeah. See, I disagree. I feel like my thesis is gymnastics is a lot closer to what we should maybe be looking at.
I wonder if that is partly because of your international wide-ranging and traveling experience with pipe band competition, not just as a judge, but also as a player. Whereas a lot of players like myself, I have only very narrow and local experience with playing. And so for me, soloing and band competitions, I've never stood a chance at any kind of like cumulative score at the end of a season, right? Of that ever mattering, because I play so few games, I play so few competitions and they're all local. And so in a lot of ways, the relative ranking at that local event is like as far as my headspace goes. Like that's pretty much all I'm there for. I wonder which of those is the more common experience for pipers and drummers. Because it doesn't have to be that way. I could be thinking big picture. I just haven't in my personal experience. I do think it's interesting though that it mentions a larger field, because I was wondering about that with numbers as I was reading about gymnastics, partly just thinking about the numbers of judges, because one nuance of having that many judges, or one detail here, is that on that execution board with the 6 judges, when they're calculating the score, Andrew, they drop the highest and lowest score completely. And then they only use the 4 that are in the middle to actually do the calculation at the end.
That's just sort of a token corruption protection device. right?
Yeah.
Is that the
But they
reason
have
why?
such a, I would imagine that's the reason why, yeah. If somebody was really going to favor or try to sabotage, then you'd think they'd be there. But they have such a wealth of judges compared to what we have in a pipe band circle. We have four, sometimes three, right, judges at a lot of competitions. And that's sometimes kind
Yeah.
of hard to get that many judges together. It can be difficult.
Yeah.
And so to have 9 judges, to have so many that you can be like, you know what, we're just going to disregard a couple of these scores entirely. They've got a lot of numbers in that way. And that probably comes from having more participants overall across the world. And, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Every year it's talked about and debated about how the world's needs to have more judges.
Mm.
And I've had conversations with a lot of different people on this one, and you can definitely see the argument. But I feel like at the end of the day, there's just not enough judges.
Yeah, where would you
Like,
get?
for example, at the Worlds, a lot of people don't realize this, but at the Worlds, they run like 10 circles simultaneously
Yeah.
or something wild like that. It's a huge number. And so like multiply 10 times 4 judges in every circle. What do you get? That's 40 judges.
Really good judges,
Um,
too. They got to be good judges.
Yeah, but like how many judges are there? There's not that many and so on. And then like all their time has to be balanced. And then the other problem you might have is in the grade one, you don't want to use judges more than once, I don't think. So we have 4 circles that we play throughout. And once you've judged one of the grade one circles, that rules you out for the other spots. So anyway, so yeah, it's a real resource problem. And then ranking is probably far easier to tabulate. Doesn't require a computer program to help you figure it all out.
Hmm. Oh, well, that was another thing about the difficulty, Andrew, is that speaking of the international standards that they have for gymnastics, part of the sort of like international, I'd imagine there's a manual somewhere that's like, here's everything you need to know to judge gymnastics. There are, in terms of like the flips and the loop-de-loops and stuff like that, there are 8 or 10 like specifically defined elements for these routines. And I think that that's because there are 8 for women and 10 for men. Or maybe I got that backwards. But each of those is like described in extreme technical detail. And so in order to get the difficulty points for those moves, you've got to like match the description in the book exactly. So like if you land on the wrong foot or something, I don't know what you would mess up, but if you mess it up, you just don't get those points for that thing. And I wonder, have you ever calculated how many embellishments we do in like typical pipe band competition? Like how many individual elements are there to, like if we had to break down bagpiping to musical elements, how many are there? Do you think there's a lot or just a few basic ones? I'm just thinking like if we were going to do gymnastic style judging for pipe bands, we might not count every individual grace note as its own move. Might be like,
Correct.
are simple grace notes not worth anything because they're so basic? But once you get to doublings, we start awarding points for difficulty.
Yeah,
And
well,
would
I mean, I'm sure you could imagine. I'm sure you could imagine how I might break this down, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I might break it down into something that looks pretty darn similar to what we see in Finding Bagpipe Freedom and what
Yeah.
we do at the dojo, right? That's how. And by the way, when I personally judge, I'm doing more or less that sort of
Mhm.
analysis. When I break a performance down, it usually starts with the big 3 for me,
And
right?
yeah, tell me
Which
about
would
this.
be
Yeah.
so for me, the big 3 include the sound that you're producing, so the sound that comes out of your instrument, and then your technique quality would be the second thing. So how good is your technique? And by the way, technique would encompass everything from crossing noises to grace notes to embellishments
Mhm.
to rhythm, well, and to rhythm as well. Although that might bleed over a little bit into the third one, which is maybe the biggest container for me, which is just your musicality, your musical elements. Are we playing with style? Is the rhythm good? Am I feeling the groove? What are you saying?
Mhm.
What are we doing here? What choices are you making? The music for me is the why behind, like, why have you showed up here with the bagpipe that sounds the way it does and the technique delivered the way it does? Like, why? Like, what's the point? And the musical sides should sort of answer that question,
I find it,
right?
maybe this just speaks to the fact that we've been talking on a weekly basis for several years now, Andrew, but I think it's fun that as I was thinking about this, I was thinking to myself, okay, if I was going to break down the bagpipe elements, like the performance elements into like moves, to be analogous to gymnastics, what would those moves be? And then I thought, I bet Andrew would break it down like so far, like far enough that like eventually you would get to like one thing. You know, are you familiar with Picasso's bowl? This illustration that Picasso did of a bowl, but it's like simplified as far as it can go. Yeah, I think the idea behind it at least is like this is a really simplified shape, but you still know it's a bowl. You know, like what are
Right.
the most essential elements to still convey bowl?
Yes.
Like I'm not being a gymnast again. I don't know if that's what happened to get to those 8 or 10 elements. Like are these the bedrock of all gymnastics or something deep like that, or was it somewhat arbitrary that somebody's like, well, those are fun, you know, so we'll do those ones or what? But yeah, I thought it was fun to think about how that would apply to bagpipes, and the way that you describe it, I think it's interesting. Containers. So here's container 1, container 2, and container 3.
Yeah.
When you say technique quality, are you thinking about finger work specifically on the piping, or are you thinking like does technique include like how you tuned up before you came into the circle and stuff like that as well?
Well,
Is that
tuning. So for me, tuning would be in the sound bucket, probably
I see.
primarily,
Of course, that makes sense. So like tuning and tone,
uh,
that kind of stuff, sound bucket.
and timbral matters as well,
Mhm.
right? In the sense of like whether or not your sound is rich and full, or if it's thin and not that interesting. That might factor into the sound bucket as well, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then for me, I suppose there's a couple of issues here. Issue number one is my values aren't the same as everybody else's,
Yeah.
right? Like, so that's problem number one. If it were me, if I ran the world, which by the way, I don't, and that's probably a good thing.
Yet.
Okay. But if I ran the world, yeah, we would say, well, let's take technique, for example. Like for me, technique definitely has like the following issues. And then rhythm is so important, but I would need to sit down and think about whether it's more of a musical in the music bucket versus the technique. But
Yeah.
technique would definitely have quality of your scale navigation, AKA how clean are the note changes, right? Now, when I'm judging, I'm doing this, but I'm not doing it in a rigid codified way, which maybe we should start to do, but I think there's pros and cons to that too. But it's like, okay, so what's the quality of the note changes? So we have to be able to produce melody cleanly on our instrument. And by the way, that seems to be universally true of any instrument. So like how good is our melody note production technique wise when it comes to moving our fingers? Not to be confused with tuning. But then the other one would be your articulation, AKA what's the quality of your grace noting? Because grace notes are how we articulate as bagpipers. So when I'm judging, that's what I'm thinking about. It's like, okay, melody notes, and then we have articulations. And then the other thing that comes together as a result of your ability to produce clean melody notes and good articulation would be, the common bagpipe embellishments that we are inevitably going to hear in these performances.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that's going to make up the bulk of my technique bucket. The next question would be, could you break it down? It would take some courage,
Yeah.
right? It would take some courage, but could you break it down and make it a rubric that's actually repeatable? Like, for example, let's say the technique bucket is worth 30 total points out of a complete possible 100 points for a performance. So the technique bucket is 30 points. Is that enough? I don't know. Maybe it needs to be more. Food for thought. So again, like I have no idea, but could you do it where you said, okay, let's break it down into 30 or 40 points or something like that out of the 100? Kind of like you might grade a paper in high school or something,
Right.
remember we used to have those rubrics, but then it could be like, okay. And then of the technique, it's like your ability to change notes, like what weighting do we give that? So like maybe you would give that a score out of 10. I'm just making things up right now.
Sure,
I'm just
yeah.
brainstorming. But like maybe but like, is that enough for clean note changes? Like I'm almost kind of wondering if technique needs to be more.
Mm.
Like maybe it needs to be more like 40 points or something like that. But give that a score out of 10. And then, a score of 10 would be there are no crossing noises audible whatsoever. And all
Yeah.
the note changes are very clean and there are no false notes. Like that might be a score of 10, right? And then you could go lower. But
Maybe
can you
that
see where
could
I'm moving
be,
towards here?
yeah,
Like
and
I'm
maybe that
moving
could
towards a
be.
scorecard.
I like the idea that could start at 10, and then every time there is something like a crossing noise or something, it's just -1 point. Really straightforward. Like
No, you
I
couldn't do it
identified it
like
as a
that.
problem there. Now it's 9. Oh, there's another one.
You
Now it's
couldn't
8.
do it like that.
You don't
You
think so?
couldn't do it like that because sometimes you don't need crossing notes to have suboptimal melody production, because you can have
Mm,
sort of the opposite problem where you have your phantom crossing noises where like you have a temporary false note switching
mhm,
notes. Sometimes you
mm,
have that too. So I'm not quite sure exactly how it would work.
mm.
Okay. But it would be definitely a great exercise to think about. And then the same thing could go potentially for your grace note quality. And then how does that factor into your embellishment quality? Right? Like our
Right.
embellishments are combinations of the first two things.
Yeah.
So how does that work? So how do you distinguish between all that and you don't let the different issues bleed into each other?
Yeah.
Like when you hear a bad embellishment, is it bad because the person doesn't understand the embellishment, or is it bad because there's melody or articulation problems inside of the
Right.
embellishment? Do you
Yeah.
see how it would involve? It would involve a very detailed understanding of my way of thinking about things in order to
Yeah.
pull off this rubric. Can you see the problem? And
Yeah.
then, is my rubric authoritative and better than other people's ways of thinking about these things? And the answer is yes. No, I'm kidding. The answer is no, not necessarily at all. And then to get people to agree or to work together towards this, it just feels insurmountable. Like even people that I respect more than anything and are my close pals, in my mind, I'm picturing Stuart Little or Jack Lee. Like I know they have really different ways that they listen and evaluate,
Mm.
like really different,
That's interesting that
right?
people
So
like at the top, even that you might think that people who rise to the very top would have really similar ways of thinking and approaching, and that would be part of the reason why they rose to the top. They're doing it in the right way. But to see variety even at that level, I find interesting and encouraging in a way. I kind of like to think that it's that way.
yeah, it just opens up a huge rabbit hole of questions. Like for example, how much room is there for innovation and difference of style in something like gymnastics versus piping? How much would you kill of what's great about piping by moving to a more detailed scoring
Yeah.
system?
Well, and it did make me wonder about things like if I'm imagining myself as a gymnastics judge, knowing what very very little I do of gymnastics, I'm imagining like, well, you're watching the movements that this person is doing. Like, how do you factor out like, what if when I was a child I had a positive experience with the color blue, and somebody's wearing a blue leotard and someone else is wearing a yellow leotard, like things like that.
Yeah.
How do I
Yeah.
or if somebody's face reminds me of my brother and I hate my brother, and like, like how do I factor stuff like
Yeah.
that out? And that surely comes into play with pipe band stuff too, with things like, oh, I have
Yes.
nostalgic feelings about this tune. I played it when I was young, or my pipe major yelled at me when I did a bad job on my D
Oh,
throws.
we
So
have
every
that
time
all
I
the
hear a D
time.
throw, I get mad or something.
I feel like we have this all the time, right?
Mm,
And those biases. The other thing that you have all the time is you see the same people all the time, and that's a big problem, right? For example, here's something you see all the time: Band A is better than Band B. Okay, like just keep that in your mind. Okay, but Band A shows up, plays the set. On your score sheet, you write to Band A. You really need to work on issue X. Okay. Now both bands show up the following week, and you're judging them again. Band A, by the way, is still better than Band B, but Band A has not fixed issue X
mm,
that you told them about on the score sheet. It can be so hard to remove yourself from that situation and from your memory, right? And remember that Band A is still way better than Band B,
mhm.
but you're kind of like, because you have a baked in recency bias thing that
Yeah.
has to do with your opinions. Or like, man, I really hate that tune that they play. And I told
Mm.
them I hate it, but they haven't changed
They're
it.
still playing it. Yeah.
But like, it can be hard to, it can be hard to then say, well, even though I hate it, they're still by far the best.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a general problem. It's like, I stylistically really don't like what they're doing. And I relate a lot more to this other style.
Mm.
However, the band that's playing the style that I hate is still objectively much better. Objectively probably isn't a really good word to use right now, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Band A is better.
they're executing it. They're executing a thing I hate really, really well. Band B is
Yes.
executing a thing I like kind of well.
Right. And so then what do you do?
Mm.
And by the way, some judges will say, screw it. I'm just going to give it to what I like.
Yeah.
But I'm
No,
not
that's
sure that's
one way,
right.
I guess.
I'm not sure that's right, but maybe it is right. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do. I don't know. I try to rise above my own opinions on things when I'm judging as much as I possibly can. So, by the way, you get this in P-Brock all the time. All the time. I can't tell you how many times where I felt like I was objectively the best player in a competition, right? But the judge hated the way I was playing it. Like it wasn't close enough to how they would play it. And so you get a bad
Yeah.
result.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the person A just understood how to play the ground better. And like what I felt was that's not necessarily true at all. That's just they just played it the way you like it. But then
Mm.
meanwhile, they didn't get their pipes in tune and their technique wasn't as good. And you didn't even consider my interpretation of the tune because it's not what you would do. That's how I felt about it. Now, that might not be true at all. Sometimes you feel great about your performance and it wasn't actually that good, bro. So maybe we're dealing with that, but you want to believe that. And that can be upsetting. When I judge, if someone's playing a P-Brock way differently than I would play it, I try to carefully consider their interpretation and think of it from the musical standpoint. Like, is there good music happening here? That's what you try to do. But then I also feel like some judges are like, nah, screw that.
Mm.
If it's not the way I like it, then you're not getting the prize. And then I'm not 100% sure that's bad. That might actually be, it might actually be what is supposed to happen. Like nobody really knows the answer here.
Yeah.
And I think that the cost of going in a gymnastics based direction with piping scoring, I think the cost might be accidentally really high.
Mm.
For example, how much more will performances start to sound the same?
Yeah. That's an interesting
Or
point.
will you accidentally incentivize difficulty too much or too little?
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that based on how these different elements were weighted, it might be as far as the points go, it might be advantageous to go for the difficult moves, even at the risk of not executing them particularly well. Or in the opposite
and then what does
direction,
that
you
do
could.
for development?
Yeah, right, totally. And the same problem could come from squishing any interest in attempting difficult things and just executing the simplest thing in the world over and over again just to rack up points if it were weighted in a way
Right.
that benefited.
Like we just don't know.
It's probably not an experiment that we're going to be able to carry out at scale anytime soon anyway, so the hypotheticals can stay hypothetical.
Yeah, you can sort of see, like, I think when you take these issues and you think them through,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of see how we've arrived to where we currently are. I personally think that we need more judges in the grade 1 at the Worlds. I personally think that. I personally think the reasons for not doing that are not strong enough. That's just my opinion. But by the way, I'm not on the inside running it, right? So I personally think we need more judges, but do we need 8 judges on every circle? Maybe not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
10 judges per a circle could be really kind of interesting. Or maybe it's not even 10. But like throwing out the high and the low becomes more possible, but like you don't actually need insanely more judges. You would need 3 drumming judges, I think, 3 ensemble, and 4 piping judges.
Mm.
And then you could throw out the high and the low, and you'd end up with the normal scoring system that we currently have, but with that sort of like that protection.
Mm.
Maybe, but like, I mean, 10 seems like an extreme number. So like, how would you expand it? What would that look like? And then wouldn't people still be upset at the end of the day? Like, is anybody here not upset when they lose?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that probably would never go away. There probably will always be like contested rulings and stuff like that. But I do think it's interesting that you mentioned even in reference to your own opinion that there should be more judges at the Worlds, you mentioned that you're not on the inside running it. And I feel like that is an important thing that only comes from entering the inside of something and helping to run it. Like that first time that you volunteer to steward for a competition can be a really revelatory experience because you get just a peek into what goes into organizing the thing. And suddenly where previous years you might have been annoyed about the order of play or something like that, Now you
Yeah.
have insight into just like what a difficult thing it is to put together the order of play, and you have a lot more sympathy for people who are doing it, and you realize maybe you even try to think to yourself like, I'm going to do this different. I'm going to revolutionize how this is done, and you try doing it different, and you realize like, oh, someone probably already tried it this way, and they found these problems with it, and that's why we do it the way we do it. And I'm not trying to say
As a matter of fact, Jim,
yeah,
as a matter of fact, I sort of sometimes think to myself that there should be a community service requirement
that's an interesting
uh,
point. Yeah.
to participate. Like take the USPBA, for example. It's a great point that you make. And I kind of think that, like, where my mind's currently at is, in order to be upgraded, you got to show me enough community service hours or something like that, in the sense that, like, if you want to progress throughout the association, it should be required that you do some stewarding, or that you help behind the tabulation desk, or you help set up the competition circle, right? Or you help shuttle judges to and from airports and whatever,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, yeah, I know enough about the inner workings of these things that, it's like, this is a lot. It's so hard to do, right? You can't just add 6 more judges to every circle. It's just not how it works.
Yeah.
There's so many things, so many details, so difficult. It would be a huge lift to even start to talk about making some of these things happen. But I've done enough though. Like, I've done the stewarding and I've been behind the scenes, and now I've, served a bit of time on the executive committee of one of these big associations, and, like, we're still in the fledgling stages of figuring out how to make it work, is the truth. I think one of the big questions would be, if everybody running the show disappeared, what would happen?
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Like, if everybody at the water treatment plant in your town suddenly disappeared, were abducted by aliens and disappeared, what would happen to the water treatment capabilities in your town?
It'd probably hum along okay
Well,
for a little bit because the systems are in place.
Not only would it hum along okay, I sort of think water treatment in your town, not only would it hum away okay, the people would be immediately replaced. And if there were any, like, vulnerabilities in that institution being able to proceed, right, everybody would get together and be completely willing and completely able to invest in making sure that the vulnerability was addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we have that sort of institutional thing that can carry on from generation to generation. Okay. And it's like, now ask that about your pipe band associations. If the people running the EOSPBA all were abducted by aliens today, what would happen to the EOSPBA? And I think we're still at the stage where it would struggle to continue.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I can speak from personal experience. I can tell you, I've thought before, many times before, if Jeff Mann and Larry Erdman disappeared from out here in the West, I don't think we'd have a WSPBA anymore at all. I think it would just, or we'd have to build a whole new thing, like it would disappear and we'd have to start from scratch.
That's right. And so now we're talking about, like, okay, we need to have more judges at our championships. It's like, hang on a second. Like, that's actually not what we need. Actually, what we need is we need to establish these institutions and strengthen them so that, we also just had a fairly wild thing, the PPBSO lawsuit thing. Like, that was wild in the sense that the monetary numbers people were throwing around. It's like, man, if that succeeds, that would be presumably that'd be the complete end. The association wouldn't be able to continue. Anyway, my point is like, I think, even though we all talk a big game and we're all passionate and, yeah, we want more judges at the Worlds and blah, blah, blah. It's like, really, what we really want is, we want these institutions that are there and able to continue to support us in a way that's sustainable across the generations. That has to be priority number one. Like, priority number one is not getting more judges so that we can eliminate the potential, like, dissatisfaction people feel when 4 judges determine the result. That's not the top priority.
Well,
would it be cool?
have,
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, totally. It's not shutting down the idea. And, like, I feel cautious about this too, because I don't want to sound like I'm saying, forget about innovating, just, carry on with things as they currently are. But, like, I guess, like, cautious innovation maybe, or something like that.
Go back to the water treatment example. It's like, how much innovation do we want
In our
when it
water
comes to
treatment, like, let's not experiment too
right.
much. Yeah, I definitely feel
Yeah. No, and
conservative when it comes
do
to
we
that.
want
Yeah.
yeah, do we want some innovation? Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
it's good that our water treatment systems are now using computers instead of,
Yeah, they're better than they used
you
to be,
know,
and that's good.
right. We like that. But we don't have to triple the speed at which our water gets treated, or like we don't actually need that,
I mean, if somebody came
right?
in and said,
It's
I'm taking over the water treatment for your town and I'm gonna shake things up. I'm gonna do stuff that's never been done before, I would start getting a little nervous.
yeah, I feel like people when they hear that they do get excited though, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
for example, I'm gonna come into the USPB and I'm gonna shake things up. And then it's like, well, and that sounds exciting because yeah, you have frustrations perhaps with the way certain things are done. But what's the risk of failing at shaking things up? Like, are
Yeah,
you left with a huge void?
right, yeah. Well, it's interesting, Andrew. I didn't expect this episode to feel like it turned into a call to action, but I feel like it kind of has. It's kind of like let's all be willing to volunteer a little bit. Let's get involved for sake of getting more insight into how things are done and why they're done, and that actually might lead to better innovation anyway. But also like
Yeah.
to help build a strong base that will keep this thing going for a long time.
If you think about the strong base, right? You think about the strong foundation. That's the important thing. I think that the issues, if you peel back the layers, these issues and these frustrations point to the bigger issues that need to be addressed, probably.
Mm.
And then, do I know what they are? Like, I don't think anybody knows exactly what they are. And then you have to find the least imperfect way of setting up your
Yeah.
establishment.
Isn't that funny when it's not like we're saying we're finding the best way to run your establishment. We're just find the least bad way. That's a much more realistic way
Right.
to look at it, maybe.
Yeah. Well, people say that about democracy. Like there's some sort of famous quote about how terrible democracy is, but it's like way better than anything else anyone's ever
Right. The
tried
idea being
before.
that it's the least bad. It's not that it's the best,
Yeah.
it's the least bad. Yeah, I got you.
Yes, exactly. And that's always going to be the way it is. The scary thing happens when it's all resting on one or two people's shoulders.
Mm.
That's the thing that's tricky.
Yeah.
We have that in the USPBA. Like I think one of the projects that I've been involved in is trying to revamp the way that we do upgrades,
Hmm.
right? Because the way we were doing upgrades is every single person had to send in a video recording of themselves playing in order to do the upgrade process. And there's lots of problems with that, I think, potentially. But there's several really good things about that as well, right?
Hmm.
But the problem is it causes a huge bottleneck that rests on the shoulders of just a few people to get through
Mm.
every single recording in a short period of time, right? That it's just not nearly an efficient enough process, even though potentially there's a lot of good elements to it. So
Hmm.
let's roll this back to the ranking problem. So I was talking about the problems with how we rank things in the pipe bands and so on, but also it's efficient enough, right? It's super efficient. It's very simple and it's possible to execute time and time again without a bunch of confusion. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
it might be the exact system that we're supposed to be using right now when you take all those things into account.
Mm.
Like gymnastics is just different, right? How many gymnasts are there? You could probably add 3 zeros to the number
Yeah.
of bagpipers and drummers there are to come up with the number of gymnasts there are. And that means there's a way bigger population that can sustain more complex institutions that keep it running.
Yes. Yep.
Maybe?
I would think so. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me, at least. For sure.
So like, I think where we are in the development of piping and drumming worldwide, we might have the exact set of institutions that we kind of are supposed to, like for lack of a better term. It might be exactly what we're supposed to kind of have right now because it has to be primitive at this stage.
Yeah. The phrase
It can't be too fancy.
like developmentally appropriate is what keeps coming to my mind. Like just like with little
Yeah.
kids, like they'll have a way of thinking, a way of talking, a way of doing things that is developmentally appropriate for where they are, even though they'll be doing it in a more precise or complicated or impressive way as they get older.
But also as a parent, you know what the process of becoming refined and advanced looks like,
Yeah.
right?
Hopefully.
It's not something like as a parent, you can't go in there and teach the kid manners.
Yeah.
You can't sit them down and you can't sit them down and say, hey, kid, this is how you do the manners. No. It's an
I've tried.
incremental thing. It's an incremental thing that has to like sort of evolve. It has to be selected for in the mind of each individual. You have to figure out and understand the explanations behind things. And that's a long and painful process.
Yeah, that's true.
Someone who has regular lapses in, basic common sense and manners still to this day, 41 years on,
Yeah.
But there you go, Jim. So...
Hey everybody, Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.